The state of Destiny 2 has never been worse. How did it get to this point? If you are a casual player, this video will highlight the lowlights and tell you the overall progression of Destiny 2's true downfall. I will mainly be talking about things that were in the State of the Game article that Bungie released on August 3rd. I'm not going to read the entire thing in this video. This will merely be a summary and include context when necessary to explain the points that are mentioned. It is also important to note that I am not a game developer, so I do not have a pinpoint idea of what goes on behind the scenes. I am left to the best of my imagination. In true and very classic Bungie fashion, they have somehow delivered an even worse state of the game than last year. They start off by talking about how they are changing ritual playlists. For PvP, they are adding 2 new maps, one new one and one reprised one. They then go on to explain that the reason they can't make new maps is because it could take away from the making of a really good story or exotic mission. The logic here is extremely off. I would much rather have new and refreshing content in PvP that I will eventually play over and over again than get a singular story or exotic mission that I will play once to get what I need and never play again. On top of this, the map that they are adding back is probably one of the more infamous maps in the game, the Citadel, which is on the Dreaming City. I don't recall a single player that was asking for this map to make a return, especially when there are maps like Retribution that are still sunset. It's just a better map. It doesn't make any sense to me. They also go on to explain that they're adding 2 new Crucible game modes to the Crucible apps playlist. I really wish they would take these game modes that they are adding to the Crucible to liven up the seasonal events that go on, like Solstice, Festival of the Lost, Guardian Games, and The Dawning. Those events have basically turned into a cash grab. And that's not to say they have never been cash grabs. I'm just saying that it is more apparent now than ever before. There are way better ways to take advantage of these resources, and it really just seems like they don't actually have any idea what they want to do with PvP, other than make it look like they're doing things when they aren't really doing things. They also have a small section about matchmaking, which can be summed up as, we aren't really doing anything because people have stopped complaining about matchmaking. Hey, I have a quick question. Did they give up on the Trials modes? Have they noticed that making Trials permanent zone control was one of the worst changes that they have done with the mode since Flawless Pool was added, and they haven't mentioned anything about it? For the Vanguard playlists, they are adding medals back like they added with Guardian Games. I don't necessarily have a problem with that, but I do have a problem with how they worded what they were changing in the post. Quote, in short, we don't want you to feel like you have to compromise your build in order to boost your score with additional medals. End quote. And then, in the very next paragraph, quote, the selection of active medals will be determined based on the currently active modifiers, such as surges, to ensure a variety of builds are used for acquiring medals. The seasonal artifact has been a catalyst for determining which weapons will be meta for a season of PvE. I have personally always hated this system because it forces you to use something that just is not good. And that is basically what they're saying here as well. I read that paragraph as, we don't want to force you into a build to be optimal, but we are going to force you into a build in order to be optimal. For a playlist that doesn't want to, quote, require players to go out of their way to grind for score, it certainly seems like that is exactly what they are doing. I also don't understand the point of adding battlegrounds as strikes or nightfalls. It's such a sorry excuse for not adding actually new strikes to the game, and I don't think anyone enjoys running Grandmaster battlegrounds. Gambit is dead. I truly don't even know how Joe was able to write the paragraph about armor sets and not laugh at it. To say that the armor sets they create for the vendors in the game have, quote, very low adoption rate by players as both base armor and ornaments is just hysterical. It really is. Why the hell would I want my Guardian to look like it just got done dumpster diving in the back of Zavala's office for a little shred of glimmer? Of course I'm not going to wear that. I'm going to wear the armor that looks like I've killed multiple gods and I've seen the edge of the universe myself. On top of that, the fact that he says delivering ritual armor sets at the rates that we have in the past has become increasingly challenging. Just to open up the Everburst store and see 10 plus armor sets sitting there with real money tied to it is just a slap in the face. They don't care about making cool things for the players anymore. They just want you to spend as much money as humanly possible so they can put it right back into making more armor sets that have a price tag. I'm not going to go into the security of Destiny 2 because I don't even really care about the systems that make Destiny 2 a secure game. As long as there aren't cheaters in 100% of my Crucible matches or PvE activities, then I could care less. The stability updates are just wild to me. I don't know, nor could I ever fathom how we have had the most unstable servers in the game's history at a point when the population is almost at an all-time low. Again, I don't even really care about how they are implementing the changes as long as they mention something like, hey, We're sorry about the unstable servers. We are actively working to make them stable again in insert time frame here. Then I'm all good. The article proceeds to talk about several quality of life improvements that they are making with the launch of Season 22. I'm confused. I thought this was a state of the game article, not a preview into Season 22, which ends up ultimately being a plea to not leave the game because look, you can favorite your shaders you like the most now. This whole section just seems like Bungie were hoping to catch many small W's to take away from the major issues of the game, which by the way, have still not been brought up in the article by this point. It is nice to see that we are getting new Strand aspects along with reworks of multiple exotics that will surely bring along some nice change and definitely not power creep the game at all. However, the fact that they are trying to introduce new weapon subfamilies at the very end of this saga of Destiny is criminal. Again, I would rather have this work go into something that would actually impact the game in a positive way instead of creating a new avenue for the game to completely break. I can only hope the Sandbox changes that they're making are so good that they have no choice but to introduce these subfamilies so that it can be the icing on the cake. Now, the moment that you all, or at least I, have been waiting for. The goals from last year and how Bungie has claimed to achieve them when they have ultimately failed and it is not even close. Like, at all. I will go ahead and admit that I appreciate how they experimented with being underwater or methane or whatever it is you want to call it. I just wish they did more with that because all it seems like they had time for was to make us walk in the water. No speed swimming, no shooting underwater threats, just straight up walking from air bubble to air bubble in one of the most boring ways possible. Somehow that's a success, I guess. They also mention how they want the story of seasons 20 to 23 and the final shape to be this ultimate, very climactic and satisfying ending, and that they are taking feedback to heart in order to tell a hopefully better story. They then go on to say that the reason for exposing the Witness's origins in the middle of a season rather than a yearly expansion, which by the way should have the biggest story beats, was because the narrative of Lightfall just simply could not handle having that revelation be in the main campaign. I don't know about you guys, but I read that as in order to experience the best story, not only do you have to buy the expansion itself, but you also have to buy the seasons that go with the expansion. Somehow, some way, they always try to make a profit if they even attempt to give the players what they want. Yes, I would definitely have to say that this goal met, hell, even exceeded expectations. Phenomenal job, Bungie. In all seriousness though, this next section is actually just hysterical and confirms my belief that these game developers are just game developers and not actual players. In their section about bringing challenge back to Destiny, they believed that they had succeeded in that goal. I don't even know where to begin with this. We have discovered the most broken builds in the game, build crafting is incredibly simple, Strand has completely removed the need for 2 of the champion mods in the game, Well continues to dominate PvE and has even spilled over into PvP, especially over the past year. We have the most broken power crept guns to date that can get the perfect roll for whatever we need them for. The newest raid has been soloed flawlessly by a great number of people, and it became easier to do in Season 22, and the list goes on. You would have to actively try to not survive or optimize your gear in order for Destiny 2 to become a challenge. It's just insane to me that those were the words I saw when reading this for the first time. Any player can get anything, and any player can do anything, and they don't even have to try for it. The game has never been easier to play. Enrich our content. What content did they enrich? I can think of 2 things, and that would be the Ghost of the Deep Dungeon, which you have to pay for separately, and the Eververse store. The main point that was made in this section was how they are going to bring back an exotic mission rotator. They didn't even include the 2 best missions that Destiny has ever brought. Those missions, of course, being the Whisper and 0 Hour. Then they go on to recap things that they have already talked about, which is the PvP maps, new PvP modes, the Sandbox changes, of which they don't have the patch notes for yet, exotic reworks, and then they mentioned Sandbox changes a second time, just, you know, for whatever reason. That all sounds great, but again, there are no actual patch notes yet. So we all just kind of have to hold our breath until they release the patch notes before forming an opinion on whether all of this is actually good or bad. Finally, they mentioned the LFG system that will be implemented in the season right before the end of the Destiny saga. This is a great change, if the change happened about 2 to 3 years ago. At this point, adding this is like adding stuff to Gambit. It will have little to no effect on how the game will operate, and Destiny 2 LFG Discord will be very alive and very well. I cannot wait to tune in on August 22nd for the big final shape reveal, where we will all be very satisfied with what Bungie is doing with their game, and definitely will not be disappointed with the lack of sweeping changes that Destiny 2 needs to ultimately be known as a success. TLDR, I hate Destiny 2, it's my favorite game.